What's up, you dirty dogs? Hey, what's going on? What's happening?
Hey.
Talk a little pro wrestling. We got our years here. Fuck yeah. 531. All right. So we got some lists from you guys on what your favorite years were. Ultimately, we didn't get like a huge ton of responses for this. We're going to talk 1984 because that's one of the years we really wanted to do. But so for those who did give us responses, though, we're going to put a little shout out on you. You're still going to get your years read because that's what we do. So AJ, I think I have a couple more than you, but why don't you start off with what you got?
Sure, I've got Harry Priest from the Mothership Facebook group, and he's got 1992, he's got 1997, 2002, 2004, and then oddly enough, he's got 2022.
2022, yes, also known as 2022. I'm not sure that I would ever put that down. It's a fine year in wrestling. I guess if I was a kid, right? I was younger and this was my year. But is there anything as a lifelong fan about this year? I mean, it's noteworthy. This is one of the most noteworthy years. Vince McMahon left the WWF finally.
Yeah, I mean, historically, it's going to go down as important year with Vince leaving, Triple H taking it. For excitement level, I can't really think of anything this year that's really just had me going, ooh, this is great.
Yeah. Like, WWE's better than a long time it's been. But that's not saying, like...
in fairness, if you take a piece of shit out of the toilet and shine it up really good, that's...
Yeah, I don't know. So... But, all right, well, I'll give you a couple lists here. I got Josh DeBoard, all right? Regularly scheduled hostilities. Shout out them for Big Get, Tony Khan, TK doing the show. Happy that happened for those guys. AJ, you're nodding your head like you don't believe that. Well, anyway.
No, I know. That's a great get.
Great get.
I just hope they got the right Tony Khan.
I hope they did too, man. Josh DeBoard, he's got 1905. For some reason, I don't believe this.
Hackenschmidt. Fantastic year for Hackenschmidt. He really put it together that year. Looked phenomenal.
54, 1972, 2000, and then 2021. Josh, I think you ran
72 was the year that Ric Flair debuted. 54 was a great year for Gorgeous George. I think that, quite frankly, Josh put together a hell of a list, and I don't like the fact that you're not taking it seriously.
Yeah, you're right. My bad. Big ups on the Tony Khan get. Albert Bettis, 1989, 1990, 1992, 97, 98. I will say this, just to be, throw something, somebody who did write lists. 92 is a year I look forward to covering because I'm a Bret Hart guy, I'm a Bulldog guy, and I'm a Shawn Michaels, and I'm a Perfect guy. And all those guys, although Perfect actually stopped in 92 for a bit.
The back injury. Way to celebrate Perfect's best year.
He was with Flair. He was with Flair. That was a great, but 92 is a great
injury.
Year.
He's out most of the year. He's there with Flair. It was fantastic.
Woo, Elizabeth was mine before she was yours.
However, you did fail to mention something. One of my favorite things from 1992 was the Dangerous Alliance coming together.
It was.
And for me, that was a great thing. And one of the best war games, quite frankly, of all time was the Dangerous Alliance with the war games. So you WWE sycophants can shove all that other shit up your ass.
I liked it. You're actually saying this because I know we didn't do anything about 1992 today. So this is legitimately coming from your fandom here. So, all right. Tell me what else we got.
Let's see. I've got Sonny Martinez from the Mothership Facebook group. He's got 1999. He's got 2002. He's got 2005, 2006, 2013. And then I don't think he understands the Jake rule because he's putting the Jake rule into effect, but then he's adding 2 years, 1997 and 1998.
Interesting. He didn't have 2012 in there, did he? Yeah, 2013.
He did not, but he did have 2013, so good for him.
Yeah, that had the Shield in it too, but it was 10 years ago that the Shield
debuted. 2012 was the debut, actually, today that we are taping this, not necessarily when you're watching this, but when we're taping this, on November 18th, 2012, is actually the debut of the Shield.
All right, I got a hot one here. Chuck Winchester. Yeah, old Chucky. He's got 1998, 99, 2001, because he took 2000 off, 2005, and 2006. Now,
Now,
90.
with a name like Chuck Winchester, does he go as the rifleman?
I do not know any of that. Now, I will say, I always look at his name and I always want to say like Worcestershire for some reason, Worcestershire sauce. But I was wondering, 98. That was the year, if I remember correctly, that me and you were at Madison Square Garden and saw the Highway to Hell, which was Steve Austin and Undertaker, and yeah, the Highway to Hell was what our ride was to get over there.
We took an old school bus,
Yeah.
and it was uncomfortable for Dave, but I'm about 6'3", and I didn't really fit into school buses when I was in school. So that was a really comfortable ride for 2 hours all the way to Madison Square
And
Garden.
you also were sitting with a man who actually outweighed you.
Yes, at the time, he was considerably larger than I was, so it was a very comfortable ride all the way there to Madison Square Garden.
But the best part, if Joe's listening to this too, was on the way home after the long ride, I heard somebody say, "Wake him up," to the bus driver who had fallen asleep while driving us home.
Yeah, that creates a little bit of excitement. The event was exciting enough, but when you get that nice ride home with the bus driver who was reminiscent of Chris Farley, if you ever saw Chris Farley as the bus driver in whatever the hell that horrible movie was with Adam Sandler.
Oh yeah.
It's reminiscent of that.
All right. All right. What do we got?
I just did Sonny. I think it's me, Tariq Amin from the Mothership Facebook group. He's got 1986, which actually was a great year in wrestling. 1987, which was also a wonderful year in wrestling. 1989, 98, and then the year 2000.
So excuse me. 87. That's Hogan and Andre. That was a great year. WrestleMania 3. 89. If I remember correctly, that's when Hogan won the title back from Randy Savage.
Well, yeah, 87 had a lot of things happen. That's the year Andre actually turned on Hogan.
Sure.
It's the year that Danny Davis turned heel.
Right.
Piper had his retirement match after Adrian Adonis. Iron Sheik and Hacksaw Jim Duggan got caught with cocaine. We had WrestleMania 3 that year, which was huge. And by the way, Bruno Sammartino wrestled his last match for the WWE also in 1987. So not a bad year for the WWE in 1987.
Okay, I'm convinced you did some homework here now. All right,
let's not forget, it was a big year for Lex Luger in 1987 as he left the Horsemen and got pushed to the moon going up against Ric Flair. You might remember that great match in Baltimore where he really did that blade job.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I got Jimmy Bletch. He's got 1989, 92, 97, 98, and 2016. 97. That was Sting and Hulk Hogan, I believe.
Yeah, 97 was a hot year for wrestling. There was a lot of action, a lot of ratings for both sides. They built up the angle with Sting and Hogan phenomenally. I don't feel like anybody believes the match delivered the way that it should have, but the year on a whole is one of the hottest years in wrestling.
Absolutely. All right, what do you got?
All right, I've got Eric Grayson, and he's also from the Mothership Facebook group. He's got 1987, 1998, the year 2000, 2002, and 2004.
2004. Can't remember much about 2004.
Yeah, I didn't really do a lot of homework on 2004 off the top of my head. I know that was a good year for Benoit. I know Guerrero would have been picking up steam in that time period. We would have seen Kurt Angle coming into fruition. But other than that, off the top of my head, not much.
I can't think about 2004 too much. I was thinking it's 10 years after 94, which I remember that's when Hogan came to WCW.
Yeah, 94, that pretty much the only highlight is Hogan coming to WCW, if you consider that a highlight.
I got Producer Joe hot off his successful tour of I got nothing.
You're
Sorry. Trying to pop him if he was listening, but I
was
got nothing.
watching independent wrestling in the foothills of Maine, I believe. It was Bear Johnson up against Elk McGee. It was fantastic.
The Maine Woods. Producer Joe's got
one of the hot spots for the independent circuit.
He's got 1985. All right. He's got 1992. So producer Joe and I would be talking some 92. 2015, which I believe is around the time he got back into wrestling, if I remember my conversations with Joe correctly. 2020, which I would say people putting 2020 down here. It's probably because of the pandemic. And then, because I mean, it was interesting. And 2022 this year, which is, again, a very noteworthy year.
Yeah, it's definitely a noteworthy year. Nobody's going to doubt that. Anytime you have a year where somebody has done as much for and to wrestling as Vince McMahon has, it's hard not to acknowledge the year.
I'm actually going to jump in to defend the 2022 choice because I believe when Randy sent me his list, he said, I know the year's not over, but he included it. And the reason I included it was the interest of Vince McMahon being forced out of wrestling, AEW maybe hitting their first shaky point in the stability of the company while still putting on TV quality matches, the wealth of the independents, GCW stepping up. It's like I'm hard pressed to actually pick a year that I enjoy. When I was talking to somebody at work about it, I'm like, for me, it's a range of years. It's like the mid to late 80s, the early to mid 90s, 2015 because I got back in, 2020 because of how interesting the pandemic was and what it forced different companies to do to survive. And this year, just basically for the noteworthiness.
And I can completely understand what Joe's saying. I get the noteworthiness. I just think it's hard to fairly judge a year when you're still in it.
Well, I think the other thing too is like he's saying the way he looks at it too is that like he has a hard time picking like a favorite year, so he looks at more narratives. Where me and you,
I get that.
Yeah, the way I think, my brain is I have favorite specific memories, and a lot of them are from 84. 92 is a good one, so they're my favorite years. It's easier for me, I guess.
Well, I think we have something in common where a lot of our memories from our childhood and then our teens and our 20s go hand in hand with wrestling. So a lot of times they intertwine, and a lot of the wrestling events intertwine with that also.
I mean, you could argue 2019 to 2022 was some of my favorite years in pro wrestling. It's when we started the podcast and we're getting interviews and doing some crazy shit. So, but nonetheless, as a fan, we're talking to Randy
my
Osgood.
favorite, well, I'll talk about when I talk about my list. Let's talk about everybody else's list first.
Randy Osgood, he's got 1992, 1998, 2002, 2010, and 2022. Again, I like that 1998 keeps popping up. That was a hot time. I mean, WrestleMania 14 in Boston comes to mind too.
Oh, no, absolutely. And WrestleMania in Boston for us, once again, is a big memory. So we can definitely understand why you would put that year in there. And quite frankly, it marks the end of us seeing Shawn Michaels for a very long time. So it's definitely a bookmarked year for us.
Actually, just I'll let you finish. But you had talked about 2004. That's when Shawn came back.
No, I knew that. I actually was going to say that for the before, but I kind of hesitated because I questioned myself.
All right, breaking news, guys. I have 3 new lists from the Booking the Territory podcast.
Oh, shit.
Philip J. Figs said 84 to 89. Craig Norman said 87 to 92. Joey Wiggins said 82 to 87. And Christian Bodie said 84 to 89. 1986 was the best year in the history of the business. I will die on that hill. I would almost argue because later on in the show, when we cover 1984, there are some big movements going on. So I just wanted to bring you those lists.
I think one of the problems that we have is that we have a tendency sometimes 84, 85, and 86 kind of blur together. And I think we have a tendency sometimes of not remembering correctly where things go in there. And when we talk about 84 later, I'm not going to dive into anything right now, but when we talk about 84 and we talk about events that just changed the course of wrestling, it's hard to find a bigger year than 1984 out of the 80s at least.
I agree.
Some could argue the mid 90s or the Attitude Era, but for me, when we talk about 84, you're going to see what we mean.
Jake St. John, 87, 92, 93, 95, 96. 87 does have the Hogan Andre WrestleMania 3 main event, so you could argue that is the most profitable year possibly in the business. Nonetheless, AJ, how many lists do you have left?
I've got 2 left plus myself.
All right, why don't you read the next 2?
All right, I got Danny Davis's little brother, Brian Davis. I assume that's who that is. He's got 1975, 77, and I know that we sit here and we're going to shake our heads and go, well, 75. But we forget that a lot of these territories, like the NWA had all the different territories in that time period. AWA was on fire in the late 70s. You had wrestling from Florida. You had wrestling in California coming from LA. And Portland was also a hot territory in that time also. So I think sometimes we judge it unfairly. I think the 70s doesn't get enough credit, to be honest with you. And then we have 83, 84, and 85. So all great years. Good job, Brian.
Ryan Davis. Who else we got here? One more.
I've got Ryan Damon. He's got 1988, 89, 90, 98, and 99.
Awesome. And I got Frank Culpepper from Booking the Territory. He's got 72, 73, 74, 78, and 79. So he was a big 70s guy as well. I mean, I don't remember much about the 70s, obviously. I was born in 76, but it's not like I remember. I just remember when I look back, I think of names like Superstar Billy Graham. Dusty Rhodes would still probably be a big part of the 70s, even though we grew up watching Dusty.
We also got guys like Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens. You've got Rowdy Piper coming into his own in the late 70s in the Portland area. You've got Ric Flair coming into his own. You've got brothers, freaking Briscoe brothers down in Florida coming into their own. You have Texas really starting to expand its wrestling with Joel Blanchard's territory and with, of course, World Class. So it's a microcosm. It's good.
Yeah, and let's mention the people who were the real thoroughbreds and who could work around this time period up in the Northeast. Bruno Sammartino, Pedro Morales. All right.
Hey, let's not forget about Ivan Putski.
Ivan Koloff. Ivan could work, actually. So could Pedro, but you get that point.
Yeah.
You were being a little biased there. You weren't giving the Northeast any love. Anyway, I know what you mean. Like, here's the problem. So WWE, which I wouldn't say was the biggest promotion in the 70s, though, but like when I go back and watch a lot of that old stuff from the 70s from WWF, shit was boring a lot of times. Anyway.
I can't. I hate to say this because people are gonna get upset and we might have riots in the street. But Bruno Sammartino, his matches bore me to tears.
Yeah, I had some, there was some fun stuff with Bruno, but there's a lot of matches you could watch and it'd be like, the 70s were just a tough time period in general. You had like a headlock for like hours, or I don't know what was going on. But anyway, and back one wasn't much better, and I love Bob. But anyway.
Yeah. So I've got my list left, and I believe we still have your list left.
I have a list.
So if you want me to fire mine first, we can.
I'll fire one up because I forgot to make mine, but I know my favorite years in pro wrestling. I can tell you right now, 84 is my favorite year in pro wrestling. 87 because the magnitude of WrestleMania 3 was just so big. It was something I watched constantly. I still remember. 92 because when I started to feel a little lull in wrestling, Bret Hart brought me back with his matches for the Intercontinental titles. All right. And then I would have to say, honestly, 97, even though Bret ended up with the Montreal Screwjob, that whole period with the Hart Foundation was just such a hot time. I really love that time in wrestling. And then I would say finally, I don't know, for my fifth year, that one actually is a little tougher for me. I would say, Christ. You know what? Let's go personal favorite. 2019. We started the podcast. Boom.
All right. So Here's the interesting thing for me. I always go 1984 just like you do. I love the year of 1984. I think it's a great year of wrestling. Um, I go 1985 also, and the reason why is because it's when the Horsemen started and really came into their own. And I was a huge Horseman fan, so for me, this is one of my favorite times of wrestling. I really enjoy it. I love going up against Magnum TA and Dusty, and it's just a fun time. You had Nikita Koloff, who was one of my favorites, even though obviously his wrestling skills were not on par with the rest of them. But and then you got the Road Warriors really coming into their own. So for me, that's a great year.
I don't want to cut you. I just want to say one thing, just because you made such a good point and you reminded me of something when they talk about the Horsemen. Scratch 2019 for me. My last one, 1989. Ric Flair, Terry Funk. I Quit match. I've talked about it plenty of times. Great time wrestling. Go ahead.
And then I was going to go 84, basically 84 through 86 to me are my three of my favorite years. It would be easy for me to put 87 on there, but I'm not going to because I prefer 89. And you had not only did you have Funk in there, but you had the matches with Flair and Steamboat also. And it's just a fun year of wrestling. 1992 is a great year of wrestling, so I'm going to put that in there as my number 5. And I do have to tell you something. There's a year that people mention. My wrestling, the wrestling that I did, which was far more limited than it was any great thing. But my busiest year that I did as a wrestler was 96 and the beginning of 97. So I didn't get to see a lot of wrestling during that time period. So I missed out on some of it. But I have gone back and watched it, and I think those are good years.
Good years indeed. All right. So I don't know if we're picking a winner this year. I don't think it really matters because we're going to start in 1984. So just thank everybody
I think the winners, to be honest with you, we don't even need to do the 5-3-1 countdown. I think the winners, quite frankly, are us as fans because we have all these years that we enjoyed. And the fact that we have the memories that have been given to us in these years, it's going to lead us into what we're going to start today, going over 1984, and then work out going through other years. And it's going to allow us to do that, having all these years.
Let's do it.
Yeah, some of the front runners from the picks today were like 87, 89, 98, 92. So we're going to cover
2022. Some kids really love that.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 84 today, and we're going to do it for the next 2 weeks. Today we'll do like an overview of the year. We'll give you some births, some deaths, some debuts, some memories. And next week, it's going to be the last Friday in November, guys. So we'll do fan feedback in 1984 rankings. And then, as always, in December, we do our best of the year. But we'll also do 1985 for the first 2 weeks of December, kind of following where pro wrestling is going. Because in 1984, the first event I got is Gene Okerlund debuts on commentary with Vince McMahon at a taping of Championship Wrestling.
That's interesting. Do you know now? Because I kind of vaguely remember this. Like, was Gene actually doing commentary too?
Yeah, it said he debuted on commentary. I believe he did commentary for like a few events, and then almost like Shivani and AEW kind of learned to get some more of that like backstage interviewer role where he really excelled.
Somebody, this is a little offset, but I just think it's funny to me. I really have gone to really appreciate Mean Gene in my older years. Like, I always thought he was an interesting character, but seeing how good he was with just those interviews, I heard somebody in the comments recently, they were talking about Renee Paquette and how good she was, and I agree, I love Renee. And then somebody was arguing she wasn't good, and they were going back and forth. And then someone made the comment, she's the Mean Gene of our era. And I was like, fuck you. I'm like, there's only one Mean Gene. Like, no offense, Renee, but like, it's Mean Gene Okerlund. Like, he was such a character, and he was really just so good. Like, I don't think there's ever been another stick man like Gene.
I mean, she might be the Missy Hyatt of our generation.
No, that's okay. Never. All right, let's move on. I want to get Missy for an interview. Love you, Missy.
Dave's gonna enjoy this, but the first Piper's Pit segment aired with Paul Orndorff as the guest. That was February 4th, 1984. That also happened on Championship Wrestling. And
Yeah.
I believe the reason that Dave picked today was Hulk Hogan winning the WWF Championship January 23rd, 1984.
Yes.
Really one of many things in 1984 that really changed the business.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're going to talk about it later, but there was another Piper's Pit that happened that year too that I've referenced before.
It comes
I'm a
up
fan.
a few months later.
Yeah. So, but Hogan, hearing like Hogan won on an episode of Saturday Morning Wrestling, the world title, it was very intriguing to me because at the time, as a kid, I had only seen like bits of Hulk Hogan like pop up, and I was really starting to find my fandom in pro wrestling, especially WWF at the time.
One of the big things in 1984, and I know Joe's working on a list, but one of the big things in 1984, because you're talking about different shows that changed how I watch wrestling, and to me was the precursor to the Monday Night Wars, was Tuesday Night Titans premiered May 29th of 1984. And that was one of those things where I finally got to see more of the WWE, because on Saturday mornings, I wasn't watching the WWF. I was watching NWA. I had no interest in the WWF. But on Tuesday nights, there was no other wrestling.
See, it was interesting because, like, I whenever wrestling was on TV, that's whenever we found it, I was watching it. But I'm still young, and I'm not sure when everything's on. And it's I never really saw Tuesday Night Titans until afterwards, and I did not like it. I'd be like, "What the fuck is this? I want my wrestling. This is bullshit."
All right. Well, we will get to that in a few segments down here. But Dave, by far, what's your favorite wrestling song?
Oh, my favorite wrestler. Oh, Jesus Christ. Well, I'm guessing it's going to be referenced to something in 1984. Another one bites the dust.
Well,
maybe I'm a Real American.
I was going to say that almost fits, but how about?
Yeah, poor David Von Erich. I forgot about this. I looked this up today.
He passed away in February of 1984.
Yeah, found dead in Tokyo. And we were speaking of big title changes in the WWF. And February 7th, 1984, Tito Santana won the WWF Intercontinental title long before he was relegated to the spot of a matador.
Who did he win?
Valentine,
that Greg Valentine,
I believe.
Yeah.
Now we got, what is it? February 15th, David Von Erich's funeral.
Yeah.
March 11th, though, Kerry Von Erich. This isn't the title he won, but he won the NWA championship from Ric Flair in a spot that would have arguably been David's had he been alive.
Yeah.
Well, because of David dying and winning the belt from Ric Flair, PW made him actually their most popular wrestler of the year in 1984 because of those events. So that was probably the best year in Kerry's career.
Yeah, no doubt. Because as a kid, I remember thinking this guy who beat Ric Flair, I found out about out in Texas. I was like, "Whoa, that must be a big deal." Because I went from that. These NWA guys aren't as good as these WWF guys, but I did realize, Ric Flair does find a way to win a lot. Who's this guy, Kerry Von Erich? He beat Ric Flair. Must be good.
I know.
And he did that at the Parade of Champions, which was just a huge event.
Young Dave sitting in front of the TV like, this guy doesn't have a leg to stand on. How's he doing that? Now, it's funny that AJ brought up wrestling magazines because what had previously been called Victory Magazine was rebranded WWF Magazine on, I don't have a time, it's March. This was the April-May issue, and this is the inaugural cover with Hulk Hogan with the championship on there. Different
look at that belt.
I know, I was about to say, then we're used to seeing him with, and this really, once again, Vince McMahon hammering home that it's a new era.
Well, I actually liked that belt. I thought that belt looked amazing. That looked like a championship.
I believe Roddy Piper had somebody on WWF Magazine on a Piper's Pit segment, or at least claimed to be.
I wouldn't be surprised, but that is the next big thing. Yeah. March 28th, 1984, Dave's favorite Piper's Pit segment of all time, Snooker with the Coconut.
Well,
Oh, wait
Snuka
a minute.
was
He
my
hit him with
favorite
a
wrestler.
coconut? I thought that was just a good right hand.
Snuka was my favorite wrestler. He could fly off the top rope, had incredible leaping ability. I thought that was amazing as a kid. And Piper was just this guy that he was a bad guy. And at the time, I thought Piper was like Dr. Death David Schultz. There was something the way he carried himself a little scary. Like I was one of the few guys. Now, again, certain guys, Kamala, all right, he had that spear, ready to go stab somebody. You had the Samoans out there eating chickens. Oh, these people, they're nuts, right? But there were certain skinny white dudes like Rowdy Piper and Dr. Dave Schultz, who wasn't really skinny, that were a little scary.
I think it's interesting that in that time period we thought Rowdy was the bad guy.
Yeah. He was a horrible man. What are you talking about?
Allegedly.
Rest in peace. Great people.
In April of this year, the original Universal Wrestling Federation is formed in Japan. And god damn, Thor's being a bitch. Of course, it's got to be live on air.
Live on air. Remember that replay, brother?
Now, in May, starting off the infamous Black Saturday, May of this year, Jack and Jerry Briscoe sell their shares in Georgia Championship Wrestling to Vince McMahon. And if you want to hear two podcasts that cover this in depth, the Lapsed Fan podcast did like a 4-part series on it that is a deep dive, but a little more comical. And you can also find the Between the Sheets podcast did a deep dive looking at the dirt sheets reporting of it. But very interesting time frame. Before AJ mentioned,
I was gonna say I don't have a vivid memory of it, but I could tell you what I do remember. I had TBS as a kid, and I remember I was always an NWA guy, so I would watch whatever would come on TBS, and a lot of times Georgia Championship Wrestling would come on, and they had that time slot on TBS.
Right.
And I remember all of a sudden seeing Vince McMahon and being like, "What?"
Yeah. You were like, "Wow, these announcers look like they could kick our guys' ass."
Yeah. The announcer even looks like he's juicing.
Well, that's
Allegedly.
not even then. This is like the start of Black Saturday, like when they set the gears in motion, because this happened in May, and the actual Black Saturday was July 14th.
Yeah.
But what did we also have? May, as you said earlier, we had Tuesday Night Titans. Cyndi Lauper made her first appearance on Piper's Pit in the same year, May 29th. June 19th was the final television tapings featuring Joe McHugh from the Agricultural Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Any classic WWF fan, I think, will remember that title screen, will remember the Joe McHugh entrances. And I think Allentown has almost become infamous since the steroid trials. And
well,
Dr.
Allentown was also for years where the Samoans actually lived. So Afa and Sika, when you wanted to train in the Northeast as a wrestler, you would either want to go to Killer Kowalski School in Reading, Mass. You'd want to go to Allentown, Pennsylvania, to where the Samoans were, or you would want to go to the Monster Factory, which I believe was in New Jersey. But the Samoans were out of Allentown also.
I just want to cover this for a second, too, because we're about obviously, that's the final episode. So maybe you want to say it first. WWF Superstars and Wrestling Challenge. I don't know if you were going to cover. I just want to say, I remember those shows so much as a kid because I remember how well lit up everything looked. And it wasn't even a situation where I necessarily but as a kid, I was like, wow. My mind was when the crowds looked bigger, and I thought it was just a big type show they were doing. And it was a weekly thing. And, I remember the entrances. I thought everything was just much cooler.
I hate to say it because I'm not trying to knock All-Star Wrestling, but All-Star Wrestling looked like something filmed in your high school gym and was a second-rate production compared to what you were seeing on Superstars and Challenge afterwards.
It's what it was, though. That's what it was. And then Superstars and Challenge was what it was about to be. Challenge was a little darker, but it was still you saw more lights and everything. And it was funny. Superstars was like the main show, and there was a lot of big angles. But I actually always kind of like Challenge because I like Gorilla and Bobby. And I don't know, there was just something about Challenge, and I didn't get Challenge all the time. So I think I just more fond of that.
And
Well,
that
No, I was gonna
changeover
say,
in the type of show that you're talking about kind of signified once again Vince McMahon going from those old look of wrestling to this new presentation of it.
Right.
AJ, what were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say, speaking of great TV shows for wrestling, Pro Wrestling USA actually debuted in September in the Mid South Coliseum. So that was a whole nother level of technology that they were putting together there. If you like
Yeah.
Mid South wrestling, it was a fun show.
Well, yeah.
However, it was not necessarily the best technical. It literally, if you were watching Superstars of Challenge, you saw the difference when the show came on. They came on and tried to make it look like a big show, but it really did not come across that way.
Yeah, in July of this year, Maple Leaf Wrestling was sold to Vince McMahon, opening the way for the WWF into Canada.
Interesting.
And
Well, that
I mean,
also brought us Jack Tunney.
that did. And we talked about it earlier, July 14th, Black Saturday. In August of this year, Vince McMahon purchased Stampede Wrestling.
Okay.
So now you're purchasing two big Canadian promotions within the same year. You're changing your TV. And this is also supposedly around the time that they're allegedly going broke. Because remember,
I imagine this is when we're going to get the Bulldogs and the Heart Foundation and stuff around this time this year. Or Brett and Anvil will be singles at first, but yeah.
Well, they leveraged
the British Bulldogs, Neidhart, and Bret Hart around this time, Owen Hart later.
When you say they're going broke, what people don't realize is that Vince McMahon in this time period was leveraging everything. He literally was pulling money from anywhere he could find money to be able to do this. This is not billionaire Vince. This is, my God, where can I get money from? And hopefully this works out, because if not, I'm going broke quickly.
Right.
And luckily for him, it seemed to work out okay.
Yes.
Yeah, now, as AJ said earlier, September 29th of this year, Pro Wrestling USA airs its first TV show in New York City, and Pro Wrestling USA featured AWA as well as NWA affiliates, including Crockett. And that was a TV program used to combat Vince McMahon growing and pushing into other areas.
And Pro Wrestling USA is where a lot of those combo shows that we saw came from, where you would see AWA versus NWA, and you would see Mid-South in there, and you would see other local promotions that would join in there. CWA, stuff of that nature would all come in and work together to try to combat Vince McMahon.
Did not last long.
The last big event I have for this year on December 28th, Dr. David Schultz slaps John Stossel. Controversy that lives to this day. And
there is a guy on one of the stores I deliver bread to. He talked to me about wrestling a little bit, and he's older. He's a little older than us. And I remember him, he sees me and he goes, "Oh yeah, it's Dave, Dr. D." And he always sees me Dr. D. And he just happened to say it today. And I just went by him. I went, "That feel fake to you?" Because it was scary as a kid. Like, I heard that this wrestler, again, a wrestler that I was scared of smacked this, like newsman. I didn't know what was going on, because to me, wrestling was real. Like, oh man, well, an idiot. Like, he asked me if it was fake and he got smacked. Well, no shit. Like, oh, you should have ran, But
I to this day believe in the conspiracy. I think that Vince told him, "Hey, make them believe it's real." He went out there, did what he did, and then Vince McMahon shit on him afterwards. So, yeah.
Even if Vince didn't tell him to, I believe the standard of the time. It's what we're told that all the old timers are taught. It's that old school way of thinking. So I'm sure something was said. Who knows what the exact wording was, but the meaning behind it was make it look real, stand up.
Yeah.
If you remember, Hulk Hogan did actually a similar thing where he actually took a journalist in a headlock.
Well, wasn't a journalist. It was a comedian, but it was a comedian on
sorry.
yeah.
on a talk show. Richard Belzer.
Yeah, and he ended up on Law and Order or whatever. But he took him in a headlock, and to this day, Belzer claims that he squeezed so hard that he literally hurt his neck, and they ended up with lawsuits. And you have to protect the business, especially back then. And I have no problem with what David Schultz did.
No, but I'll just say this too, from a management standpoint, given the time period. I mean, it's pretty classic, simple anyway. Like you manage personalities, right? Yeah. Like, who would have thought that this was a good idea? Right?
Why are you putting this guy in that interview?
Right, a skinny, small little guy who's volatile and has the balls. I'm going to go right now. I'm going to point it, and I don't know, like, oh man, I'm Stossel. Yeah,
hopefully John Stossel learned don't act like a tough guy when you're a little bitch.
I don't know. We remember that dark side where he was. He sounds like he's healed now, apparently, from the money. He came off. Yeah, but
he's a douche. Yeah. I do have a big news story that you did not list. And this to me is one of the big news stories, and it went hand in hand with Cyndi Lauper. On July 23rd, Wendy Richter actually ended the 28-year reign of the fabulous Moolah at Madison Square Garden and became the first women's champion in the WWF in 28 years. So that's pretty impressive to end that streak.
And that would lead actually to another screw job, almost the first of the
Spider Lady.
Exactly. They brought in Moolah because Moolah was a legitimate tough lady. And they brought her in and had her actually just pin Wendy Richter's shoulders to the mat legitimately. And you never saw Wendy again.
I was going to ask, is there anything that you guys had memories of 84 that was not covered in this? Because I kind of went through the big ones, just like the noteworthy things that I saw.
I could be wrong on this. When I did my research, I believe the original G1 climax was also in 1984, and that was actually won by Antonio Inoki.
That's how I would have to look into that. That could be. It looks like Dave's Googling that currently. The dog in the background is disputing it.
Oh, sorry.
I had a thing of 1984 stuff that I was just curious about. But yeah, I don't know. I was just checking out some other stuff from 84 here. I was not Googling it. Sorry, guys.
All right. Well, let me know what you were looking up, and I will Google it.
One of the great things and one of the feuds of that year, and this is a fun thing, is that's also the year that the Freebirds got into it with the Von Erichs. That's where they actually turned and attacked Fritz, and Michael Hayes got pissed off about it actually, I believe, started in 83, but by 84 it was going red hot, and it was just a hell of a feud that year. If you like wrestling feuds, go back and check that out. It's hard to beat the Freebirds versus the Von Erichs.
So I have it's funny. So I had some notes earlier from 1984 that I can't find, and but I ran across this site, right, and I just was scrolling, not even really like looking, and I don't know. This is such a fascinating year. Like right here, January 28th, 1984. Michael Hayes defeated Ted DiBiase for the All Japan United National title in Athens, Georgia. Like, just to me, like, Hayes and DiBiase are two of my all-time favorites, and they were wrestling for an All Japan title in Georgia. And like, All Japan to me is like that mythical promotion I read about in PW Insider.
And that might have been linked to the tour that brought David Von Erich over there. If I'm
wow, yeah.
1974 was the first G4, so
I'm way off. I'm sorry about that.
That's amazing that the G1 was 10 years old in 84. And we're talking about something that's almost, 38 years old this year.
Yeah, and I do know Antonio Inoki actually won.
He won the first one and this one.
And this one. Here's a couple fun things for you. Andy Kaufman passed away allegedly from cancer that year. Talk about wrestling legends, the feud that he had with Jerry Lawler in Mid-South was obviously a lot of fun. And then we also have, here's some people that actually debuted that year, and maybe we could talk a little bit about them. That year, Jushin Liger debuted. The Great Muta, KJ Muto, actually debuted that year. That's Scott Hall debuted that year. Marty Jannetty and Shawn Michaels actually both debuted that year. Marty did debut before Shawn Michaels did. Nikita Koloff debuted that year. Yokozuna.
Yoko in 84?
Yeah, Yokozuna, 1984. I'm looking at it
Wow.
right here. That's and then one more for you that you might not actually know, and this is a big one. The Italian Stallion.
Fuck out of here. You had a picture already. I can't believe both of you thought this was fucking.
I actually had pictures for a lot of people. Let me give you, because I had a list of debuts. I had Fred Ottman.
Fred Ottman, yes.
Yokozuna.
Steve Armstrong.
Steve Armstrong. The Undertaker.
For shit.
Of course, the Italian Stallion. Marty Jannetty. Maybe the best Wyndham to have ever lived. Kendall.
Fuck off.
Shinya Hashimoto.
I know who that is.
Shawn Michaels. And I had the Great Muta.
Nagami also. Akira Nagami also debuted that year. Here's some of the people that actually retired. Angelo Mosca. Billy Red Lyons. Paul Vachon. Stan Stasiak. That's the other one.
Okay.
Tommy Gilbert, who actually was still young at that point.
More famous one.
And then the father, Miguel Perez, also of the Perez family, actually passed away that year.
Had a lovely sweater. His son would have had a lovely sweater he was wearing for every match.
Hey, another death. Vincent J. McMahon died May 24th.
Wow.
Now, here's the funny thing is he was actually only 69 years old. He looked old. He looked old. He looked old for a long time.
Hey, I just want to say, you did some research today, brother. Like, I'm impressed. Like, I came in at the last second. I lost my notes, and AJ's like, "Nah, Dave, you're the one who's got to pick it up today, brother." I'm like, God damn.
Well, you know what? One of the most famous Mexican wrestlers of all time, El Santo, actually passed away February 5th of 1984 at the age of 66.
Yes, he is one of the most famous. Yeah.
Now, I got some wrestler births for you. January 1st, Veda Scott.
Veda Scott, thank you.
February 2nd, Brian Cage. February 17th, Jimmy Jacobs.
Thank you.
May 7th,
Kevin Owens.
Steen.
Or Steve.
Kevin Owens, yeah. May
Whatever.
29th,
Nia Jax. I like most girls.
July 13th, Jake Christ.
Oh, yeah.
September 3rd, TJ Perkins.
TJP.
You got some good ones there, but I got a couple to add to that. Corey Graves,
shit.
February 24th. We've got Orange Cassidy on May 4th. We've got Sami Zayn on July 12th. And then a big one for you, literally, Nia Jax on May 29th.
He did Nia, though.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you were looking this up.
Did he do Eve Torres in August?
Oh, no. I like how Dave came to this boxing match unready, and me and AJ are like, nah, we're going all 12 rounds.
Oh, by the way, God also gave us a gift that year. Rusev, December 25th.
Oh, wow. I didn't know he was a Christmas baby.
Yes. I didn't want to spoil that one because if you're checking out our YouTube channel, that might be something coming up.
Oh, shit. Now, guys, anything else about 1984 that you want to cover before next week? We're going to get fan feedback because I put out why was 1984? What are some of your favorite memories from 84? And we got answers.
We do.
Yeah, you're going to have to wait till next week.
Shit. Our fans, they're participating.
And we're gonna pair it with 1984 rankings. So we're gonna look up the Pro Wrestling Illustrated rankings of that year, see what else is out there.
So I will. I know AJ did retired wrestlers, but since everybody wanted to add on something, I had actually looked this up, and there were just two names I wanted to mention. One was, and AJ might have mentioned this one, so I apologize.
It doesn't count as a retirement if David Von Erich died. Okay.
Tim Woods retired that year, and then another one. People might remember this, but we had talked about Piper's Pit. Frankie Williams retired that year. Frankie Williams was the wrestler Rowdy Piper beat up on Piper's Pit.
Yes.
And legit beat him up a little bit, by the way. Roughed him up and got him out of there.
Enough that he retired.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently got the fuck out.
Guys, this is breaking news. John White got this in way too late to be included in our 531, but I asked him last night at work, give me your top 5 wrestling years and why. And he, like, a couple people were like, oh God, years? I don't know. Let me just figure it out. So he sent me just now, 2002. It was, he says, year Cena, Orton, Ray, Brock debuted, etc. That's a big year.
Sure.
2012, the year Punk held the world title, the Shield debuted. 2001 was just a wild year. 2014, the streak ended. Bryan won the title and the Shield disbanded. 1998, Attitude Era began. Austin won first world title and Rock was getting better. So some more feedback on that and just more reason of more years that we're going to cover down the line because
can you believe it's been 8 years since the streak ended?
Yeah, wow. That's pretty wild. Yeah.
The first time it ended. Then you had that other weird loss with Roman that just didn't really fit.
Yeah. Well,
it just didn't logically make sense.
No, it is kind of interesting.
That was the fake retirement. Sorry.
It's kind of interesting, though, because the only two guys that ever beat him are basically been the top guys in the business now for the last several years, Roman and Brock.
I guess it did kind of make him a little.
If you think about
Brock
it.
didn't really need it.
It helped. Yeah, Brock didn't need it. I think Roman more than needed it, but I don't know if it counted at the time. I feel like all the goodwill that Roman did was, you know, almost COVID and after.
Hey, I want to call one audible here this week. Actually, there's a particular thing that happened.
A good audible.
I want to talk about. I'm just curious. This is fans, because
we're talking about Kendall Ryan getting back in the ring.
No,
former guest.
No, we can talk about that. Did you watch? First off, I know AJ did. Joe, did you watch Dynamite this week?
I did.
I watched like the first half of it.
Okay, did you see the Britt Baker promo?
Yes.
Or actually, no, I'm misspeaking. No, I haven't saw it yet.
Okay.
Because it wasn't loaded up on the app yesterday morning.
Okay. So
I think me and Dave actually agree on this. And
it's one of the few times. It's a great fiery promo, but it's one of the first times I'm watching this. It's early in the morning, and I'm listening to it, and I'm like, and she says, you know, you basically along the lines, like, you know, you come in here and you judge me. I never worked at Madison Square Garden, but I worked at Daly's place. I worked there in the pandemic, and that's something you'll never understand when people needed us. And I wrote this, Joe, and I watched this. I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is the most babyface fucking promo. And I felt like it was almost like, are we trying? I've heard people on post talk about it where at other places too, where like, you know, this was a babyface promo. They thought, you know, it was a good promo, but also a really bad promo. Me, I almost went a step further. I'm like, are we trying to underline? Like, are we trying to, you know, like make so like, you know, okay. Yeah, Randy got it too. Like, I didn't get it. It made me mad a little bit because like the girl's coming back like a fucking career-ending neck injury and a recovering addict. And it's like, we're like, nah, bitch, you're heel. Fuck off.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Soraya's the bad guy, it's one of the greatest promos I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was weird.
But considering she came down the aisle with Jamie Hayter right after that, waving her arms around, and they're all still acting like a heel. Horrible promo.
Yes, somebody brought up a point that Saraya might have brought some of this on herself. That because she had mentioned, you know, you weren't ever a superstar, let alone a star. And some people it might have got turned into just like an invasion type thing. I thought they both kind of killed it the week before. And I guess I'm reminded of those times though in the Attitude Era where like like Kevin Nash and Scott Hall maybe came to WWF, and you got Rock over here who's like calling him Razor Ramon, Chico, and going down with the Diesel thing. Like he'd just rip into him and they'd rip back into each other. But you knew who the face and you knew who the heels were.
Yeah, they're not doing a good job with this at all.
Yeah.
I want to point something out. I don't think Saraya is as good on the mic without having it scripted out for her. I think unfortunately she's one of those people who needs to have it scripted. In my opinion,
I'll tell you what. I thought she did a good promo last week. I know, like I said, some people didn't like the references, and she forgot a couple things, but it was the most fiery promo she had delivered. And I also want to say she hasn't probably had to do a promo like that in many years.
She has the passion for it. I'm not taking away from that.
Right. So we'll wait and
she
see.
Seems to have trouble. She's almost forcing herself to say things.
There, Randy Oscar he is just so ready for this weekend. I guess that's something I know we're already going, but like I didn't mean to, but I guess we could talk a little Full Gear here.
Yeah, we're only.
I was
going to
say we buried the lead because Dave talked earlier about falling asleep on the bus to what was it, MSG?
Yeah, you were listening.
Let's hope that doesn't happen on the way to or from the Prudential Center tomorrow, because Dave and I will be in attendance for the post 5-year anniversary podcast. And then ourselves and friend of the show, Scott, will be heading over to the Prudential Center for Full Gear. And it's been the last thing on my mind all week. But let's jump into some of these matches because Randy Osga has some hot takes in the comments.
I'll look for you guys on TV.
Yeah. We got you, brother. Meet us down there.
Now, let's talk about some of these matches. What would you say you're looking forward to the most? And we're gonna say outside of the championship match.
Oh, okay.
That sucks because it was going to be the championship match.
It's the championship match for everybody because, I mean, I think Randy might be saying what a lot of us could be thinking.
Yeah, this has been an underwhelming build. I would say if I had to pick another match, just based off the promos, I'm kind of curious how everything's going to go down and how people are going to respond. But Saraya and Britt Baker. And even how this could be a more Saraya hasn't wrestled in like years.
To survive.
Yeah, and it sounds like I think Brian Alvarez pointed out like she found out like she just got cleared. So has she even been able to work out until like what, the last week or two?
I would like to point out that she went over to England and was actually working with her family and was helping them. I don't think her family's going to make her have a waiver to take a bump.
No. We don't know. I'm optimistic, but it'll be interesting.
Would you say she's fighting with her family?
Listen to you.
But here's the funny thing. That's not even the women's match I'm looking the most forward to. I'm actually looking more forward to Jamie Hayter versus freaking Toni Storm.
I thought it was going to be Nyla Rose versus, what's her name?
Oh, Jade. Yeah, that's what I'm all looking forward to.
Oh my God, is that on the pay-per-view?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be on the pre-show. That feels like a pre-show match.
Oh no, that's money, baby. That's gonna be the pay-per-view. Ricky Starks. Well, no, I'm sorry. Whoever wins tonight between Starks or Archer will be wrestling Brian Cage on the pre-show, and apparently now Ethan Page is wrestling the finals on Dynamite this coming week. So that got moved off. So Ethan Page is not on the pay-per-view anymore.
Thank God.
So what about
the way this card is building? I'm tired and I haven't even started driving yet tomorrow.
How about so I look forward to next Friday doing this show alone, guys. We'll do it in the memory of my co-hosts.
I'll make some graphics up and I'll email them to you now. So
I'm gonna have guest Randy Osga as my new co-host. It'll be fantastic.
Dave and I are gonna become angels for real.
What about the situation between Samoa Joe, Wardlow, and freaking
that
what's
feels
his
like
name?
A pre-show match as well.
Well, okay, so we got to elaborate a little bit because the way it's been built, like it's like Samoa Joe should be a big fucking deal. Hobbs has been
All of them should be a big deal.
But and they all had a momentum at some point. But the way this has been carried out is like Wardlow is arguing with Hobbs back and forth, and he's just like, "I'm gonna take every title." And Joe's like, "Oh yeah," and then chokes him out, which sounds funny, but in reality, it's like, "All right, next segment."
But how could Joe react any other way?
Right. Well,
The
yeah.
guy in the ring is saying, "I'm going to take every title," and you're sitting there holding a belt. That's
He had a good promo this week, actually. You should check that one out. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
all three of them have had actually have had good promos.
Yeah, that's
Hobbs is killing it
deal.
on the mic.
Yeah.
Why do they not want to use these three? Is it the same problem he has with Brian Cage?
Luchasaurus versus Jack Perry in a cage.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, you know what? We don't need these three studs going.
Yeah.
We don't need these three studs going at it. We've got Jack Perry and Luchasaurus.
You know what I'm kind of excited for? Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal versus Sting and Darby Allin. I kind of excited just to see Sting and Jarrett back in the ring. I know people are going to be like, what the fuck? But yeah, I think it's fun.
Hey, how about
I
this?
don't mind it.
Instead of doing the whole Ric Flair's final match pay-per-view, why not put Ric Flair in this match, in the Darby spot, and make that his retirement?
Yeah.
And how much better of a send-off is it?
So
how much more does it make sense?
Is this the first time in their career that Jeff Jarrett looks more muscular than Sting?
Yeah, probably.
Maybe, but is Jeff Jarrett going to jump off the second level of this?
No, probably not. It's my Tennessee ass.
I just want to know when Sting actually really went crazy.
Oh, man.
Did he drink the same juice that Terry Funk's been drinking?
I saw a clip of.
No, he's living on his own. Shout out to the legend.
I'll tell you what. Joe, I hope we make it out all right, man.
I'll tell you what, we're giving the fans their money worth today. We're going into overtime for people.
You know what's funny? There was a time when Joe was such an early bird, and night was his problem. Now, because Joe likes
for 15 minutes in the morning for time that we leave.
Well, you don't even know. What's funny too is that so behind the curtain, I got here at 11:59 today. I had to skip the store. I've been running behind all week, so I have to get up tomorrow, still deliver to 2 stores now, and make it back and be in June City for 8. So I'm like, whatever.
Shout out to friend of the
have
show,
you guys
Scott,
considered having? Have you guys considered having friend of the show, Scott drive?
I don't think that's happening.
Drive, so that's my part in this business.
No, I'm joking.
Normally, I would be the drive man, but I don't have a working vehicle right now that's reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I could always drive you guys and wait outside.
Randy actually already offered, and we're like, no, thank you. We can't have you do that for us. It's actually, it's going to be a good time, but driving home tomorrow night, that's going to be interesting. And
so I've been shitting.
I'm early bird, so I'm going to have to wait early. And
let me talk about my bowel movements. We got a show to do.
Oh, God. I think it's time we sign off and we can talk about.
I've been shitting for 3 days straight. Diarrhea. I got some ammonium AD. But part of me wants to go to movies tomorrow because that was a place in that movie Dogma where they had that restaurant, which is a real place.
Was not actually where we were looking to possibly go. It was the Quick Stop, actually, that Clerks was.
The good news is because of all.
I remember that too. I want to go there at movies.
There's movies. I thought there wasn't movies in the area.
No, they're all near each other.
But the good neuse is, due to Dave's bowel movements, you guys will have to stop so frequently you won't have time to fall asleep.
Yeah, I've been good today. That Imodium AD looks like a motherfucker.
Hey guys, they say that we're so much of the shit that you got to wipe twice. We'll see you next week.